Is this on? Yes, it is. Okay. My name is Wendy Stephenson. I'm co-chair of the Environmental Action Team. I am going to be introducing our two speakers. They each have about 25 minutes to talk, but I know they can talk for much, much longer than that because they have just a wide wealth of information. But they'll try to keep it to 25 minutes, and then there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers after that. So our first speaker is going to be Lynn Fitz-Hugh. She's the Executive Director of Restoring Earth Connection. Their action group, Friends of Trees, works on local tree protection. Lynn has been working on tree issues for 12 years in Seattle and Olympia. And then our next speaker will be Philip Stielstra. He is the co-founder and president of Propagation Nation, a Pacific Northwest-based nonprofit dedicated to expanding the presence of coast redwoods and giant sequoias as a climate adaptation and carbon sequestration strategy. So first we'll have Lynn.
Thank you. Okay, let me see if I actually, okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, I am going to run through a very quick benefits of trees, and then I'm going to talk about the protection work that we're doing in Thurston County. So for some of you who are longtime tree lovers, this is like, oh yeah, I already know that stuff. Sorry. So not only are trees beautiful, but we are literally in a symbiotic relationship with them. They are breathing in carbon dioxide, and they are breathing out oxygen. And we are breathing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide. So literally, the air we breathe depends on trees. So that means that they do a lot to improve our air quality because they're actually pulling down pollutants while they're doing that. And we know that in neighborhoods that do not have trees, there are higher levels of asthma than in neighborhoods that do have trees. Whoops, too many. Go back. There we go. Surprisingly, they also have physical health and mental health benefits. So by drawing down those pollutants, they are, well, and also they have a little aerosol that they're releasing into the air, unbeknownst to us, that has all kinds of good stuff in it. So they're helping to boost our immune system, to lower our blood pressure, to reduce stress, to decrease depression levels. They can help with focus, especially for children who have ADHD or ADD, accelerate recovery from surgery or illness. Kaiser's actually recommending that people who are in cancer treatment take 20-minute-a-day walks in the woods. And they can help increase our energy levels and improve our sleep. There's one study that shows that if you can even see a tree out your window, you're less likely to suffer from depression. So they are really doing climate work for us. All the other strategies we have for fighting climate change involve trying to reduce our own carbon footprint. The trees and agriculture are literally the only things that are pulling the carbon out and reducing it for us. That is actually how I first got involved in working on tree issues, but boy, have they taught me a lot of things since then. They help prevent heat islands because of the shade effect. This will also lower our energy bills because the little cushioning they do in the winter helps from the cold coming in, you don't have to do as much heating. And then, of course, in the summer, the shade means you don't have to do as much air conditioning. They also help to prevent flooding because they do stormwater management. Each tree captures a certain amount of rain and then pulls it down the tree through its root system into the ground. So they can be doing thousands of gallons of stormwater management per tree every year. So when we see these crazy developments where they just clear cut every single tree, are just creating a stormwater management problem, not to mention a heat island. And then, of course, wildlife habitat. That's a sort of obvious one that we can all see. And in that particular photo, you see a big leaf maple, which is native to here. And they're one of the first things that comes out and provides a food source for bees in the spring. Carbon sinks. So I already talked about the fact that they are sequestering. So there's two things happening. There's what they're drawing down, and there's what they're storing. And so the older the tree, the bigger the store that it has. If you cut the tree, that is released. Also, if you cut the tree, that ends its yearly contribution of drawing down. And science used to believe that the little trees, the baby trees, were the ones that were doing the most sequestering. The theory was that, well, they're growing rapidly, and so that makes them doing something. Turns out that it's the bigger trees that are the master sequesterers. They need that girth to be really effective at it. So the older the tree, the bigger it is at that, which you will hear more from Philip about big trees. So I've already sort of beat myself to the punchline of that. All trees are not equal. The big trees are doing a lot more. And that tiny little person in the middle of there gives you some scale on how big that tree to the right is. So that tree is doing transpiration. So there's a certain amount of moisture that is released from the tree as part of its process of changing CO2 into oxygen. And that is drought protective. So trees are drought protective in two different ways, partly by sending that moisture down into the soil, and then also by their transpiration. So many of you know this, but this is one of the kind of new things science has figured out in the last 15 years, which I just find so cool, which is that trees have microcausal networks. They have these little hair-like threads that come out of their roots and then can go literally miles. And so the trees in a forest are all connected to each other. And they're doing some pretty amazing things with that connection. They can feed nutrients to baby trees. They can try to help a sick tree. And if the sick tree is contagious, they will seal off from the sick tree so that it doesn't kill the rest of them. And when a tree dies, its last act is to send all its nutrients through the mycorrhizal network to the other trees. They absolutely act as a community. I would say in some respects better than us humans do. That says what I just said. So we have here the Thirst and Climate Mitigation Plan, and it does call for tree codes that will be protective of our trees because, while planting more trees is a good climate action, turns out protecting the bigger ones is an even better action because of what I've already explained. So one of the things that my organization does is we work big time on trying to get the 4 jurisdictions, the county, Olympia, Tumwater, and Lacey, to pass truly protective tree codes. The ones we have in place right now, for the most part, are 20 to 30 years old. They don't reflect the new science, and they're not actually protective of trees, which is why you have all driven down a street you hadn't been on it for a few weeks, and suddenly a whole bunch of trees are gone, and you're just like, oh my God, what happened? It's because we don't have a protective tree code. So we're trying to get us to where we will have actually protective tree codes, and so I have sort of a list there of what we need. We need to be clear, we need fines and enforcement, we need guidelines for replacement, we need limits on cutting, and we need definitions of exceptional trees, significant trees, and historic trees, which I'm going to say a little more about that. So this shows you what Olympia has. I know you don't all live in Olympia, but it's typical. Actually, Tumwater has a very similar thing. So this is what I call the floor method. So it specifies that by the size of your lot, which is on the left side there, how many tree units you have to have. Now, you might think that that means number of trees, but it actually doesn't. There's another chart, which I don't have there, that shows the size of a tree. So an 18-inch circumference tree would count as 4 units. So if you're in the size that requires 4 tree units, you could have one big tree in your yard, and that's all that you would be required to have. Now, most of us, if we've lived there for a while, there's plenty of trees in the yard. So most people actually have more than the city would require of them, which unfortunately means that if somebody gets it into their mind, buys the house, moves in and says, this tree's dropping too many leaves, they can cut it and there's nothing to stop them. So that's what we're trying to change. So Lacey lost 15% of its tree cover in 15 years, and 70% of its citizens want stronger enforcement. The local language, which is being used now, it was adopted by the county and then by Tumwater, and so I expect Olympia and Lacey to use the same language. Is a heritage tree is one that is over 40 inches diameter at breast height, and a landmark tree is one that is 24 inches in diameter at breast height. The reason we're trying to introduce this sort of designation system into tree codes is because it then begins to allow the city to make some rules that will protect the biggest trees. So we're hoping that there can be, if not entire prohibitions against cutting heritage trees, at least really, really strong ones, and then something fairly protective for the landmark trees as well. So one of the most common framings that you will hear over and over again, because the developers have really pushed this big time, is we have a housing crisis, which I do not disagree with at all, and that we need affordable housing, but then they will sort of frame it as if it's one or the other, that we have to have trees or development, that they have to be free to cut all the trees down when they do development if we want to keep the cost of housing down. And it's really a false framing, because what actually happens is if they are free to cut down all the trees in the lot, they are also free now, due to changes in state law, to build out to 5 feet from the edge of the property line. So they've kind of done away with the concept of backyards now, and 5 feet isn't enough space for a tree to live on anyway. So they've changed state law in a way that's going to be very much pushing towards less trees. And if that really got you like 2 duplexes and so affordable housing, that would be one thing. But the rules don't designate what the builders build. And where the profit is in the per feet, like they get a certain amount of money per square foot in a house. So the bigger the house, the more money the developer gets. So that's what they're concerned about. So it's really important that we push back on this false framing and say that you can still have the same square footage by building up. make a smaller footprint onto the land, leave room for the trees. And even though we have a state code that's not very good right now about the setbacks, our jurisdictions have the ability to still say some things about the footprint of what goes on in the house. So that's what we're really working on. And just to let you know what's coming up, I've spent 8 years now pestering all 4 jurisdictions to get them to make a better tree code. The county, bless their heart, in the summer of 2023, passed the strongest county tree ordinance in the state of Washington. So we can feel really proud of them for that. The only problem is it only applies to South County. It does not apply to the UGAs, and that is where all the development is happening. So when we kind of discovered that, oh dear, it's not applying where we really need it to, we are now in the process of pushing the county, and I think it's going to happen, to get in their work plan for the next 2 years, adopting it to be in the UGAs. Yeah, there's a question back there. Oh, thank you. Urban growth area. So there's a little area outside of each one of our towns that is in the county, but it is designated that that town will annex it as they expand. And so that is where the most development happens, is because they're preparing housing for there. So we're trying to get the county to make a really strong tree code that would apply to the UGA of all 3 towns. And we would see a really different thing if we saw that happen. Tumwater started 3 years ago creating a new tree ordinance, and they were on their way to having a really great one. And then something was happening on the state level that seemed to kind of threaten, like whether it would even make any difference to write the tree code at all. So they stopped, and that resulted in a 2-year pause. And they are this month going to issue the first draft of what will be their new tree code. So stay tuned, because we will have opportunity to make input onto that, and it's going to be really important to get Tumwater to do a good one, because if they do a good one, we hope to say then to Olympia and Lacey, do this, do what they're doing, do it, it's good. We have pushed and pushed Olympia, and Olympia is finally starting this month work on a tree code. They unfortunately have a 2-year plan to work on their tree code. And Lacey, well, that's going to be a really long story. Where do we have? Okay, so that was basically got me through where I wanted to get through, which is to tell you what is coming up for the different tree codes. Let me see if I can get to the slide with my email, because if you would like to be on Friends of Trees mailing list, then we have once a month meetings, and we work on this idea of how to protect the trees, and you will get updates then about our occasions to write to the 3 cities and that sort of thing. You're seeing all the things that you're not getting to see today because we have limited time. Oh, but it doesn't have the email on there. Let's keep going, see if we can get to one that has the email.
You could just tell us.
I could. You will maybe not get it right if I tell you. Okay, well, I'm going to have to, because that's the last slide. So you can email me at Lynn, Lynn, at Fitz-Hugh, Fitz, hyphen, got to get the hyphen in there, HUGH.org. So if you email me, say, I want to be on the Friends of Trees list, and I will get you on there. So how am I doing on time, Wendy?
You have 7 more minutes. You can talk
Oh.
about legacy forest.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, let me go backwards then. I surprised myself by my own speed, my gosh. I'm not known for speed, so that's a big surprise. Okay.
Can we practice the microphone really quick? Sorry.
What's that about the microphone?
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
I'm curious about the code where the each lot is supposed to have 1 tree or 2 trees or tree units. Is there somebody that goes around monitoring that and telling people that they don't have trees on their lot and they must do that?
No. When new building happens, they're allowed to cut everything, but then they have to plant back to there. And this is another thing I would love to get changed, because even if they just kept the one big tree, that would be much better than them cutting everything and planting little crabapple trees, right? So that is one of the things I hope to get changed in the code. In terms of like, you know, there's your neighbor and they've got a chainsaw and, and the trees are coming down, you do have to have a permit in all of these cities, so you can ask if they have a permit, and if they don't, you can call and hope you reach a city official. That's the hard part of the thing, and they can make them stop. It will be temporary because they will have to get the permit. If they have enough trees in their yard to go ahead and cut down the ones they're wanting to cut down, they will still be able to cut them down. And they only have one arborist in Olympia, and so that person does not have time to run around to all these tree emergencies that are going on. So again, I just come back to, we have to have a better tree code. Like, there's no other way to actually accomplish this. Yeah.
Is this on? Oh, there it is. Okay. You partly answered my question. I wondered if Olympia still has an arborist. What about the other cities?
About which?
Lacey, Tumwater, do they have arborists?
Yes. Well, Lacey does not have an arborist. They have a contract arborist, so I don't know exactly how that works. Tumwater does have an arborist that has a really good arborist, actually, who is working pretty hard on getting new trees planted for Tumwater, so that's nice. Yeah, so they all have arborists. They all have rules. The rules are very similar right now between the three cities. They just have a floor of what you can cut down to. Yeah. I'm going to briefly mention the Tree Ambassador Program, which is something that we did last year. So we had a grant from the City of Olympia to do this. We had trained volunteers who went door to door, and the volunteers had a handout called Benefits of Trees that listed all that kind of stuff I was talking about at the beginning of this. And they were giving that to people, and we were trying to vaccinate people. We were trying to get people to understand enough what the benefits of trees are, that they wouldn't just make that arbitrary decision to cut a tree down because they thought the roots of it were destroying their driveway or whatever their reason was. So we did that, and it was paired with a tree contest for biggest tree in Olympia. We were trying to find the biggest tree, we were trying to find the biggest of every species, and then we were also trying to find the biggest one in different neighborhoods. And so some of you may have seen that in the newspaper, because it did wind up getting reported in the newspaper. And if you go on our website, which is restoringearthconnection.org, and find the Tree Ambassador page, you will also find where the results are reported, so you can see what there is to see. And we have made a little route for each neighborhood of where you can walk in your, well, neighborhoods are big, so maybe ride your bike, but there's a little path of, you know, where you can go in a neighborhood and see the biggest trees there. Yeah, you had a question. It's restoringearthconnection.org. So that's the name of my organization, Restoring Earth Connection. So that's kind of a fun thing, and it's fun to see those really big trees. And just in case anybody is wondering, the biggest tree in Olympia is 32 feet in circumference, which is gigantic. Yeah. Yeah, we did circumference because when people are walking around, that's what they can do. Go ahead, Sue.
Well, there's this hemlock that has been dead for years, and we finally were going to have someone cut it down on Thursday. Is there a something good come out of a dead tree?
Hemlock wood is valuable, but
No, I mean, can it stay there dead, and it would be good for insects or birds or something?
yeah, I mean,
I could stop it, that's what I'm thinking.
I mean, the general advice is if you leave something that's about 6 to 7 feet high it will become like a woodpecker home and that sort of thing. If it's a very tall tree and it's dead, you really actually do need to take it down because otherwise a windstorm can pull it over and it'll hit somebody's house and we don't want that. So, yeah.
It's probably pretty telling. What I'm wondering whether Sue's tree cutting person had to get a permit or not. You know.
So if they were following the rules, then they would have. And a lot of the tree cutting companies in town are very diligent about that, and they will measure all the trees in your yard so they can verify that you have enough tree units, even though by the bald eye you can see that you have more than enough trees. But there are other ones that are very, like, you've probably had this experience. They leave you a flyer in your mailbox and say, oh, we're in your neighborhood cutting down somebody else's tree, and we'll give you a special deal on cutting down your tree. And so they will really kind of heavily promote cutting the tree, and they're about making money, and they're not concerned about trees or the welfare of the trees. They will happily cut down a healthy tree. So if you do need an arborist, because let's say you want to check, is this tree healthy or is it in danger of falling down? Like if you have a worry about that, I suggest you get an arborist and find out if your tree's healthy. But do be careful to get somebody who's good. And if you follow enough clicks through the tree ambassador part of our website, it will guide you to someone else's page that has all of these certified arborists in Thurston County. So I would suggest that you get a certified arborist and not like the people who cut the lawn or something. Yeah. So, okay. Okay, so I should stop now?
Yeah, just do a nice conclusion and then yes.
Oh, okay. So in conclusion, we work on protecting trees, and if you are a tree lover and you want to help protect trees, we love to have you on our mailing list. We anticipate in the next year that because the county, Tumwater, and Olympia are all going to be in some phase of working on tree ordinances, that we're going to have to do a lot of pushing. There will be moments where we will need to write, and there will be moments we will need to show up and testify before city council. And that is to, like they get waffly about this stuff. And so when enough people show up and say, no, we really want the trees protected, and that means tree designations, don't leave the tree designations out of there, or we don't care if you make penalties. We're citizens telling you it's okay to make some penalties. That influences them. So we need you, and I hope you'll get on our mailing list. And I'm so glad that Philip's going to talk about big trees.
Thank you, Lynn. You're welcome. Before I start, I'm going to offer you an opportunity to get a little brochure and sign up for our mailing list.
So Philip, when you've gone 20 minutes, I'll give you this. And then you'll get another 5 minutes. Okay?
So this will go really fast, I'm sure. Number one, this is such a pleasure to spend this amount of time with this group. Propagation Nation has been doing redwood and sequoia sales for the last 3 years. We're right outside this door, or this window, and we'll be doing another one on the 25th of April. You've been wonderful hosts for us, and we just really appreciate it. Okay, quick question for you. And raise of hand, whatever, who's been to the Redwoods? Everybody in the room, almost. What is your experience of those redwoods like?
It's awe-inspiring.
Others, just shout it out.
Overwhelming sense of scale.
Yeah. It's like otherworldly. It's like this is, and if you've been to the groves in California where they're just huge, you realize, God, this being has been here since before Christ. It's just, it's hard to fathom, isn't it? Well, I want to just share with you a video here, and let's hope that it works. This is a 5 or 6 minute video. Steve Stillett, who has been climbing redwoods, and he's now a forestry professor at Humboldt State, and he is still climbing redwoods and measuring them. But he's just got a few words to share. Hopefully this will.
I've just got to redo it to get the audio, and then I will.
Okay.
Coastal redwoods indigenous.
Well, that's a good question. It's a good time to ask that while he's getting this ready. Redwoods actually are considered to be native along the coast of California, but they've been around for tens of millions of years. And before the Ice Age, before the glaciers, they were all across North America, they were across Europe, they went up as far as Alaska. So this is really an excellent place for them to grow. Now that it's back warmed again and even getting warmer, they do really well in Washington. They just amazingly well. Western Washington, thank you, yes. Are we ready to?
One of the things you should try to achieve in this show is to, you talk about one of your episodes being the natural history of trees. Well, start with like a redwood seed. This is like a fingernail clipping. And that has all the information needed in it to create a 350-foot tree that's been standing there and interacting with its environment, responding to its environment for 2,000 years. It's all contained in this one thing. And there's tremendous beauty in that process, how these trees do what they do. And they have a lot more to teach us, but people haven't been listening very much. Redwood is, it's an oddball. It's a conifer. It is in the cypress family, Cupressaceae. It has very small cones, and it doesn't produce that many cones or seeds. But yet it prolifically sprouts from roots, from trunks. It's got this incredible capacity for sprouting or reiteration. It's got not only that capacity, but it has a huge capacity for longevity because it has rot resistance from the heartwood that resists fungal decay. It's got thick bark to resist fire. It's incredibly shade tolerant, so it can kind of hang out in the shade, and then when opportunity comes, it'll send up another one. It's the ultimate tree in a lot of ways. It combines a bunch of characteristics, and of course, it's the world's tallest tree, and probably one of the longest lived. We haven't been able to verify ages beyond about 2,000 years, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future we were finding trees considerably older than that. Yeah. But redwood is an oddball because every cell in a redwood has 6 sets of chromosomes, which is very strange. It's called a hexaploid. So every gene in the redwood genome is represented by up to 6 different forms in every cell. Whereas humans, we have 2, 1 from each parent. They've got 6. It implies a tremendous reservoir of genetic diversity. It's also it's the only hexaploid conifer known. It's been on this earth for quite a while, but it goes back tens of millions of years, at least. Well, they don't have a taproot. They're very shallowly rooted. They have big pancaker roots. But the interesting thing is that all the trees are the roots interlock. And I suspect that they all share resources. So one tree can subsidize another. In fact, occasionally you'll find in the forest an albino tree, pure white foliage. There's no photosynthesis possible. And it's still alive and growing. And I think it's just basically parasitic on this massive root network. And they're all alive. And you know that they're not maintaining enough carbon from their own photosynthesis to survive. They're sucking off the mother root system. So they have a lot of really quirky characteristics. One thing that's interesting is that the wood production rates of the trees, at least here in the north coast of California, seem to have increased in the 20th century by quite a large margin. So if you plot, if this is time, and this is wood production, you get to about 1950, and it starts going like this. It's going up a lot. And what's been happening since the 1950s? Well, if you look at the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, after the Second World War, there's an inflection point where the CO2 levels are starting to really go up. So it's tempting to link the increased wood production in the northern redwoods with increased availability of the substrate for photosynthesis, CO2. It's certainly a growth surge unlike anything these trees have experienced in the last 1,000 years. There's more wood being produced by these trees now than at any time in the last 1,000 years or so. At least. That's as far back as our records go. But they're individuals, just like us. And they have these long lifespans, way beyond us. And the things that they can achieve in their lifetimes in terms of providing habitat for other creatures are just becoming impressive spectacles. When I've climbed these big old trees in the old growth forest, and I've climbed, Washington, Oregon, California, Australia, primarily. But when you climb these, it doesn't matter where it is, and the big old trees, each one of them is an individual. Each one of them is distinctive. When you get into the old forest and you see these big old trees, and each one of them so different from the other, and the way they move in the wind, and who's growing on them, and the views from the tops, how they look from each other's tops. And what I've found is that when you get into these situations where your life's at stake because you're way the hell above the ground, and you've got to focus on not killing yourself. When you are in that focused state, you can finally your sense of self is gone, and you're just there. These moments, they come unbidden, but they're very profound because you finally feel like you're connected, and you're not so focused on all your little stuff that you're worried about, all your little deadlines and things. And then you can get a glimpse of what it must be like to be a tree, and to have that temporal scale. And that's what's so impressive about them, is just how they can be in one spot for 1,000 years.
And that's not common knowledge. It really is not, which is why I thought it was so important that you see that. And it's what really drives Propagation Nation to really get those distributed. There is they're not native debate. That is a false debate. They're the original trees that used to be here in Washington. So when people ask us about that, we're just bringing them back home.
One thing is, you use the term redwood and sequoia, but there's 2 different ones, and you're only talking about suburbans, right?
Yes.
There are people online who
Yeah.
cannot hear the question, so that's why we have to do this.
So you're using the term redwood, but I understand there's 2 different redwoods, the sempervirens and the gigantea. You're talking only coastal, right?
This video was only coastal redwood. There's a few differences between the giant sequoia and the coast redwood. And these are some of the amazing differences that that Steve Sillett described. But in many respects, they're very similar. Their growth rate, their protecting from fire, their immune systems, and I don't know if we'll have time to get to it, but I've got some information about that. So let me, I guess it's up to me here to move. Okay, so I got introduced to, and for those of you who've signed up for the mailing list, I'll be sure to send you, this is a 10-minute film, and it's about David Millark, who's pictured here. He started a nonprofit in Michigan called Archangel Ancient Tree Archive, and they have gone to the redwood forest, they've gone to the sequoia forest as well, to clone the oldest and largest to save the DNA for future generations. And I first became connected with them in 2012 when I visited him in Michigan, which is where he's from, and I subsequently then went on an exhibition to the Sequoia and then the Redwood Groves in 2016. In fact, here's a picture of me 200 feet up a giant sequoia. And at the end of that expedition, I told him, David, I'm going to get some of your redwoods planted in Seattle. And he said, I know you will, which reassured me. Okay, you're going to send them. This was May. Actually, that was May. This is November. 350 redwoods he sent. These are clones of some of the world's oldest and largest redwoods from California. And I distributed those to 30 different park districts around Puget Sound. So this is back in 2017, virtually 9 years ago. So that got me started. And from there, I connected up with 3 gentlemen. They probably show up on this slide. This is Ralph Monroe, Bob Barnes, and Dave Pearsall. They called me and wanted to come up to the Seattle Park Nursery, which is where the Archangel trees came to, and met with me and then my 2 colleagues who had helped me start Propagation Nation. These gentlemen have been doing such an amazing job with trees. If you can read this, they've been getting children in Olympia planting trees, and they started that in 1990. They're running out of places to plant the trees, but it's just an amazing story. And Bob Barnes in the middle, that's his private nursery behind him, where the trees that were tiny there, this was in October. This is in July, and they're just huge. I mean, he's got one green thumb. We have unfortunately lost our 2 friends here. Ralph Monroe died last year in March, and Dave Pearsall died in May. They were such a big help because all 3 of them helped me start a 1,000 Redwoods project, because by the time, I guess it was toward the end of 21, we had 1,000 redwoods and 300 sequoias. And we said, they can't stay in a nursery, we need to get these planted. So we began to just find tribes. All kinds of people. In fact, here's a list. I don't know if you can read that, but park districts, restoration projects, landowners, conservation districts, land trusts. So this is over 2 years. We did about 1,000 trees a year between October 21 and April 23. Those are where the tribes received close to 800 trees. This is Olympia area. And this was 3 years ago now, so there's a whole lot more redwoods and sequoias in the Olympia area now. So at the end of 2022, we decided, 1,000 trees is nice, It's more than 350, but it's not going to get us anywhere. We're going to need to have them grown locally in nurseries so that we can scale up. And so this is one of the nurseries where we scaled up. And the first year we had 14,000 grown that we distributed. One of the ways we got the word out is we were fortunate to get some publicity from the New York Times Magazine. They wrote up an article. This is essentially about what propagation was doing, but also looking at the whole debate around assisted migration. That was October of 2023. That was followed on with the Seattle Times article the following January. Do redwoods have a place in the future of Washington's forests? Well, yeah, they're already here. There's redwood forests in Washington that are 30 years old, and trees that are this large. They grow much faster than the Douglas fir. There's
The biggest tree that I said we found in Olympia was a sequoia.
was a sequoia, yeah. They grow huge. So I want to just keep moving along. So the next year we delivered that was the first year. The next year, 40,000. We did 40,000 again this past year. Next year we're growing 50,000. And we certainly sell them as plug seedlings as they come out of the nursery, but we also sell them as potted trees, which we'll be doing here in a couple of weeks. So we did set a goal. We want to get 1 million redwoods and sequoias distributed annually, not just cumulative, annually. So I first had that thought, and I thought, is that crazy? How many trees do they even plant each year in Washington and Oregon? Who wants to venture a guess? How many trees? Any guess?
10,000.
10,000. Do I hear?
10,000 more.
How?
100,000.
100,000. 10 million. Do I hear any more?
2 million.
2 million. Oops. Well, let's just see here. 92 million. 52 million in Washington, 40 million in Oregon.
I have a question. I live so close to Puget Sound that every week I see hundreds of trees on ships go out of Puget Sound, and I'm thinking, where do they come from?
Yeah.
Who's replacing them? What are they?
Okay, so now you have to
Okay.
rephrase that.
Okay, I live close to Puget Sound, and every week I see huge ocean liners taking out hundreds of trees, that have been stripped of their bark and they're ready
Logs,
to
yeah.
they're harvested. Where do they come from, and are they being replaced? Do you know?
Well, apparently they are being replaced. Somebody's planting trees here. And I'm guessing they're planting more than they're taking out. They generally are planting 2 for every 1 they take out.
Can I take a shot at this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Lynn, wait.
So there are plantation forests throughout our state and Oregon that groups like Weyerhaeuser have. So they grow Doug firs fast, thin, quick, and they cut them. But they also cut older things that they can find. So that's the private market, and the private market can go internationally, which is what you're seeing. And then the Department of Natural Resources manages state-owned trees, and those cannot be shipped outside of the state. And I didn't have time in my part to talk about what they're doing to our legacy forests that are in DNR, but that's a real issue.
Thank you.
We need another talk about legacy.
So we thought, gosh, 92 million a year. If 1 million of those were redwoods, it would hardly even show up on a pie chart, So, so I've got 9. How much time do we have?
You got 5 minutes.
5 minutes, so we can probably get through this. This is 9 or 10 slides from a presentation I gave to the Olympic Region DNR TFW, that's Timber, Fish, and Wildlife. And they had a presentation in June of a year and a half ago from the U.S. Forest Service person about their view of assisted migration. They will move something from the lower part of a range to the higher part of a range. And one of the individuals who, they meet quarterly in Forks, one of the persons who is a forester for commercial timber, we had gotten in touch and we'd showed him some of the redwoods that are growing in Washington, and he got pretty excited. So he wanted me to, he arranged for me to do a presentation to that same group. So I thought, well, this is a scientific group. I really need to put some slides together. And again, for anybody that signed up for a mailing list, I can send you a link to read the whole thing. But these are just a few selected slides because, well, let's just look at it. So these are some of the assaults that are happening to our native forests due to the warming climate. And it's really severe. More fire, longer fire seasons, insect and pathogen outbreaks, Swiss needle cast, probably you've never heard of that. It's decimating Douglas firs in major parts of Oregon. I mean, people are forming collaborative groups to try to deal with it. Bark beetle, severe drought stress, western hemlock, and western red cedar dieback at its tip. So just a host of issues. This is just one example of the slides there. This happened back in 2022 with the heat dome, where it got referred to as Firmageddon. Lots of die-off. So this is a picture, one picture, of a series of climate profiles developed by the U.S. Forest Service, trying to project what is the viability of the native trees that we're growing into the future. And the viability, high viability, is shown in red. Low viability is no color at all. This is as I say, the economic impact of doing nothing can be catastrophic. We want to be called the evergreen state. That doesn't look evergreen to me. So what can we do? I wish that it wasn't just a small citizen-led group trying to deal with this stuff. I wish the DNR, the U.S. Forest Service, were tackling this issue head on. So what do redwoods and sequoias have to do with this? I won't read each of these to you because you heard some of this message from Steve Sillett in the video. But these trees are absolutely amazing. And when you, that's the kind of growth they do. The bars on the left are the coast redwood and the giant sequoia. When you look at the same assault list, redwoods and giant sequoias, they're not bothered by that stuff. They impregnate their heartwood with toxins that keep the pests away, keep disease away. I mean, it's like they've used that hexaploid set of chromosomes to figure out how to deal with all of these challenges to surviving. So, so their response, and again, I can't read this. I don't know if you can either, but they do so much better with all of these assaults. I mean, they do not have any problem with root rot. They're not affected by Swiss needle cast. They deal with drought much more easily. Certainly giant sequoias even better probably, but they both deal with drought. There's a tree farmer in south of Salem, Oregon. He's got 500 acres He's been farming for quite a few years. He kind of had an economics background. In 1980, he said, I'm going to plant 8 different species in different parts of my tree farm to kind of diversify and see which grows well. And by 1989, he added redwoods to that mix. And he said in 2017, the test is all over. Redwoods won everything. He had planted them where the ground was super wet, where it was super dry, where it was south-facing, north-facing, good soil, poor soil. He said, I only plant redwoods now. He's got still standing 200,000 Douglas firs, but he says anytime we take any of those to market, and we don't go there unless the price is good, whenever we take those to market, we replace with redwoods. That's the kind of situation he's in. People ask the big ecology question, aren't they going to totally disrupt the ecology? You know, the trees that live in Washington, the natives, also live in California. They coexist. Redwoods are not an invasive species. As you heard from Steve, they do a very poor job of creating cones and seeds, and the seeds they create don't germinate well. I mean, we're going to have trouble getting seeds to grow seedlings. And we'll have to use clones because the companies in California like Green Diamond that plant 500,000 redwoods a year, it's all from clones. They couldn't get enough seed to grow that many redwoods. Let me see if I can wrap up here. Yeah, at some point somebody challenged me about, wow, don't you think you're going to create new problems? And so I consulted, this was back in 2019, consulted Steve Sillett. He said, no, it's a great idea. And he still thinks it's a great idea. I'll wrap it up here. Actually, I might. So what are we doing this year? We're continuing to advocate, as you're hearing me do right now. We have test plots that are being grown by 28 different tree farmers in Oregon and Washington to just see how these trees do. We do redwood roundtables the 4th Thursday of every month so people can get together and learn from each other about how their trees are doing. This year we'll be distributing 50,000 plug seedlings. They're being planted right now, so they'll be available probably next February and March. We certainly have potted trees available now that we've potted from this last year's crop. We've been partnering with schools, tribes, private landowners to create community forests, and so on. There's the team, not everybody, but that's the team that's doing this work. Bob Barnes is next to the top on the log. Next to him is David Brown, who's kind of picking up the mantle of growing a nursery of redwoods and sequoias. He lives also in the Olympia area. Next to him with the green t-shirt is Shira Brewer, the executive director that we hired, the first one that we hired last September, doing a fabulous job. I'm at the bottom. Next to me is Harry Bhagwandan, who's a tree farmer in Lewis County. It is just a lovely team, so impassioned. So if you would like to get involved in any fashion, if you didn't sign up and you decide you want to change your mind, you can just go to our website, and if you picked up a brochure, the website is on the brochure. Yeah, so we do tall tree tours, we do redwood roundtables, a bunch of stuff. We'll be doing a big potting party, so fun, at Dave and Linda Brown's here on May 2nd. So and it's just a lovely way for volunteers to get involved, get your hands in the dirt with these tiny trees that are going to be just so gigantic. It's just so much fun. Let me wrap up here. Yep, so there's our sale, which is a picture from where we sold previously. There's just a few of the large coast redwoods, large giant sequoias, and so on. So, but that's my story.
I'm going to have you stay out there, Lynn, why don't you also go up there so we have some time for Q&A. If you need to leave, I understand. But we had first a question over from Dorothy, and then I see you next. So wait for the microphone because there's people on Zoom.
I plan to buy some next week and plant them. Will you include instructions so that we have it? Because I'm thinking one needs to think about where they're putting them because they get huge fast.
Definitely.
And then like how deep and do they need compost and so will we get a handout or something?
There's on the website where you would go to purchase them, there are instructions for both redwood and sequoia. They're slightly different as far as where the site where they would grow the best, and also instructions on how to plant. We'll probably, even at the sale, have a page with stuff you could just take a picture of with your phone and so on. Yes.
Oh, just a minute.
I'm just going to add, anytime you plant a tree in your yard, look up how big it's going to become. Because when I was doing tree ambassadors and walking around neighborhoods, it was kind of distressing sometimes to see a gigantic tree that somebody had planted 2 feet from their house, and the tree just only had 3/4 of a tree. The other part had been eliminated by not being able to grow into the house. And other problems happen too. So look up before you plant a tree how big it's going to become.
Yeah, so the instructions, I'll reiterate that. The instructions will say, plant these at least 30 feet away from any infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, homes. So don't plant them next to your home. Yeah.
Just to get an idea how fast these grow, how old were the trees that you showed, those last 3 trees you showed?
I don't know the age of those, but I do know when I handed out all of those 350 trees to different park districts, 10 of them went to a park in Seattle, Laurelhurst Playfield. It's kind of near the university. They were planted by 3rd graders and kindergartners, and the trees at that time they planted were about this size. So that was November 2017. It's now 9 years later. 2 of those trees are 30 feet tall. Some of the others are not nearly so tall. They're probably 10 and 12 feet tall. But the 2 that are that tall were literally growing 4 feet a year.
I will add to that, again, when I was doing the Tree Ambassador program, there's a sequoia on the corner over by the West Side Co-op that it's stunning. You know, it's 5 stories high. And so I said to the owner, wow, you know, you moved into a house with this really big tree. And she said, oh no, I planted that tree 25 years ago. So 25 years and it's 5 stories tall.
A question about the Northwest. Are you familiar? Is there anything going on up in British Columbia? They must be suffering some of the same disease problems. And I was just curious what you might be able to tell us about what's going just north of us.
They do have a group like ours that is trying to get some of these trees planted. We haven't paid much attention to them because shipping seedlings across into Canada is problematic, very difficult, lots of bureaucratic stuff to go through.
I had a comment. I bought a coastal redwood from you guys a couple of years ago and planted it, and a deer destroyed it. Basically, it's still alive, but barely. Is that normal?
Normally, so I'm wondering how the deer destroyed it. The deers typically, both coast redwoods and giant sequoias, do not appeal to them to eat. But they love to come up there and rub against them, and they can rub them, just smash them up, just either because it's that kind of season, yeah. So, yeah, but they don't, typically they've got terpenes in the needles and stuff that the deer and the elk don't like. But they can, and where there's herds of elk, where out like Lewis County and stuff, they can just trample them because they're not paying any attention. They're in their path, and there's a herd of 100 elk, and it's amazing. But as far as, cedar is very tasty for deer and elk. So it needs to be protected, but typically not true for redwoods. So I don't know. What do you know how?
Not really.
Okay, yeah. And there are other animals that can certainly be bothersome, whether it's raccoons or voles or a variety of.
They tore the branches off and peeled the bark off. Left just a little tiny stump.
Yeah, so that sounds more like a raccoon, where they're just. It's probably too small to have been in portions of Washington State where there are black bears. Black bears can develop a taste for redwood, and they'll just peel back into the cambium, and they can certainly kill a tree. But I doubt that they would bother with something that tiny.
So, Lynn, I didn't get your mailing address, if you could repeat it.
I will. So Lynn, Lynn, at Fitz-Hugh, FITZ-HUGH.org.
I have another question for Lynn. Lynn, can you give us, this is going to be a challenge for you, the 3-minute synopsis of Legacy Forests and what's going on with Legacy Forests?
Sure. So I mentioned before that the Department of Natural Resources is in charge of our state lands. And so there are forests all around Washington, east side and west side, that DNR is in charge of. And on the west side, some of those that, pretty much throughout our state, everything was cut at the turn of the last century, around the 1890s. But the buzzsaw did not come into popularity until around 1945. So logging changed dramatically at that point. Before that, when they had to go with horses, cut down a tree, drag it out, they always left a fair amount of smaller trees. So you didn't have the complete destruction of an ecosystem. Whereas once they had, this ability to just mow the trees down in the way that they do now, they went to this method of, this is logging across the board, not just DNR, but they went to this method of just clear cutting a field, and then they will drag out the debris, and they will spray poison onto the entire thing. This comes out of this cuckoo notion that they have that trees compete with each other, and they're going to replant it with just dug firs, which is all they want. And so they don't want the competing other trees. So they spray it with poison, and what they do is they kill the understory. In our native Northwest forests, the understory is part of there's a whole interdependence of how those plants relate to each other. So when they do that, they kill the ability for it to ever be that native ecosystem again, which is the real tragedy of when they take out these older trees. So they replant them as plantations, and then after that they just do monocrop, and they just, every 30 years, they cut them down. So we have a very limited number now of areas throughout the state that are still these legacy forests, which is essentially second growth. It's trees that have grown back since 1945 or maybe the turn of the century. And so a bunch of us around the state have been really fighting for them, really trying to protect them. And many of them were protected by the Endangered Species Act because the marbled murrelet would nest in them. Unfortunately, due to certain incursions that were made on the Endangered Species Act, that kind of attempt to protect the marbled murrelet went away. So under Hilary Franz, who was the previous director of DNR, they started the cutting of the legacy forest. So that started about 4 years ago. And many of us fought really hard to get Dave Updegrove elected because he had a promise that he was going to protect the last 70,000 acres that we have of legacy forests. And for those of you who are Star Wars fans and know the concept of the Borg and being assimilated, Dave has been assimilated. I'm sorry to say that the Weyerhaeuser embedded staff that work for DNR has just basically convinced him that the idea he had was not possible. And we know it's possible, but Dave no longer knows it's possible. And so the cutting has continued under Dave. He made a brief moratorium, which was supposed to allow the staff time to plan how they were going to do this, and instead they used the time to persuade Dave that it couldn't be done. So we are still having horrendous cuts to our legacy forests. And I had told everyone to vote for Dave because I was like, in the next 4 years, we will either have legacy forests or we won't. And it's looking a lot like we won't. I will say my only upside to this story is I sort of focused myself on trying to save this one particular legacy forest, which they name them all before they cut them down. It's very weird. But anyway, they've named one Bears. That's by McLean Creek or Kennedy Creek, where the salmon are. I'm sure you've all been out there and watched the salmon there because it's where people go in our county to watch the salmon in a creek. And they actually want to cut that, believe it or not. And they want to cut that in 2027. So I just had a sit down with Beth Dolio last week, and I said, Beth, at this point, our only chance is you've got to get the funds for us to essentially buy it and turn it into a, salmon reservation or whatever you want to call it, salmon learning center. So Beth said she's going to go for it. So she will need our support when that's happening, but that's kind of exciting that we can save at least that one. And there have been like 4 or 5 different parcels that got saved due to the real diligence of our Thurston commissioners. I have to say they have been great. Universal vote by them each time. They've sent many letters to DNR saying, don't cut down this parcel. We want them all saved. Don't cut down this parcel. And they've been ignored first by Hillary and then by Dave. But through their efforts, they have been able to save, I think it's 5 different parcels now. And that's, that and Bears is, I think, what we're going to have left by the time this is done. I wish I had happier news for you, but I'm just happy about Bears right now. Yeah.
Could you please say the name of that parcel you were talking about, or we could have a salmon reservation?
It's called Bears. That's what DNR calls it, is bears. And so when we write them, we're writing and saying Save Bears. And if you want to write them now and say Save Bears, it won't hurt. I mean, it's a year out, but I think the more they hear the drumbeat of the public doesn't want this, the public doesn't want this, the public doesn't want this, hopefully it will allow them to just go along with Beth when she brings that bill forward.
And we have had another speaker previously to talk about Legacy Forest, from the Legacy Forest Defense Coalition, Joshua Wright.
Mhm.
Yeah, he came here. I don't know how many of you remember that. Did you have a question? Okay. Any more questions? Thank you both, Lynn and Philip. Yes. Paula, do you want to announce the tree sale? Paula's going to announce.
Okay, so April 25th, which is about 2 weeks, Propagation Nation is selling redwoods, and sequoias, different sizes, and clones of Archangel, and they're going to be doing it right out here in our patio, and it's an experience. And
you can certainly walk in and buy, but it's better if you just go online and.
So you can pre-order or buy.
You can
buy at the time.
and then just come by and pick them up.
Yes, and they have tons of photo albums, fabulous pictures of redwood forests and propagation and all.
Right, Lynn has one more thing to say.
Yeah, I forgot my announcement. So for Art Walk, which is that same weekend of the 25th and the 26th, Friends of Trees will be, for a first time ever, in Art Walk. And so if you go to Swing Bar, we are having tree art. So it's all a celebration of trees. We have photography, we have felt work, we have mosaics, we have paintings, we have charcoal drawings. So just a whole variety of pieces celebrating trees. So it'll be that Friday and Saturday. Swing Bar is open from 3 to 9. And then on the Sunday, they're open from 10 to 2 for brunch. So you don't have to, eat anything there. It's Arts Walk. You can just go in and see it, or you can eat something there.
It looks like we're all going to be busy on the 25th. There's lots of things to do. Thank you.